stories don't define you. How you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief story maker of Elkins Consulting. We share stories for many reasons, to persuade, to entertain, to connect. What we sometimes forget is the impact of the stories we tell ourselves. Whether you're sharing personal stories or business stories, how you share them makes a difference in how you remember them and in how you're perceived by the people you're interacting with. When you figure out which stories to share, difficult bosses and coworkers, successes, failures, the next step is to develop how you share them. Have you figured out your patterns, your roles in those successes, the discomfort and your challenges? In this series, you'll hear stories that will resonate with you. You'll nod your head in understanding, and then we'll dig into the lessons from each of those. How many times have you been sharing a story only to be interrupted by a person eager to share his own? When I'm working with clients on communication skills, I remind them to listen for understanding, not to respond. But during this podcast, I'm asking you to listen and consider your own related stories, to listen and consider which stories in your life might have impacted you in a similar way. We've been exploring the concept of resilience in a series of episodes on this podcast, and each one has helped me better understand this theme. Resilience can come from so many places, and for each human, it shows up differently. I'm seeing how it shows up in my guests' lives, their relationships and careers, and as I hiked up the mountain behind my house on my birthday recently, I had some aha moments about where it shows up for me. Every year I take time on or around my birthday for deep self-reflection. This annual tradition has helped me redefine success periodically in my life, refocus on what really matters to me, and to consider the patterns that have benefited me and done damage. I look at those patterns in my life to help me figure out where I might be getting in my own way. I believe that asking myself those hard questions, the ones that the answers may make me cringe and see myself in a less than positive light, is part of why I've demonstrated resilience throughout my life and career. When I see patterns of negative relationships, personal and professional, and understand whether and how I may be contributing to them, I can choose to make adjustments. It's not fun to realize you're complicit in your struggles. It would be much, much easier and safer to blame others and extenuating circumstances, because then we don't have to take responsibility. But doing that is not going to make me resilient, and worse, I would continue to live a cycle when I don't identify the patterns, learn lessons, and choose my next steps. I'd be lying to myself about who I am and what I stand for. As I've mentioned in earlier episodes, choose your obstacles and struggles, or they will be chosen for you. On my quiet birthday hike, I couldn't stop thinking about all the joy and sorrow I've experienced in this decade. I lost my father-in-law, my dad, my stepdad, and a dear family friend over a period of 2 years. So much grief for our family. I also joyfully welcomed an ideal brother-in-law and 3 nieces into our family, and took pictures of my father just months before he passed, filled with joy, peace, and love as he held his newest grandchild. I watched our son struggle through junior high and high school and come out more resilient, confident, and compassionate. I had some euphoric career highs as part of major projects, and a devastating career low that took my confidence for a dive. We had extraordinary travel adventures, float trips on the Missouri River, and had friends who our family support us in remarkable ways. And in the middle of all that, I finished an MBA and became a professional musician. I started singing in a rock band for the first time at 40. As memories of all these events were brilliantly and vividly flashing through my mind, what really caught my attention were some of the incredible lessons I learned in that time. I thought for this episode I would share 2 that I can say changed and improved my life, and helped me flex my resilience muscles as I navigated my 40s. Sometimes your contribution to a conversation isn't necessary or helpful. Think before you speak, and make sure others in the room have a chance to contribute. We've all heard that before. Think before you speak. But do we really apply that in every situation? In my 40s, I switched jobs 3 times, The second one in that decade was a particularly bad fit. I was a compliance officer for a major federal grant, and I don't even like rules. On top of that, my boss and I had some major personality differences. We struggled to find balance in our shared cubicle, and there was palpable friction between us for the duration of our time together. My confidence took a major dive in those 2.5 years, and at points throughout, I found myself sinking into depression. I learned a lot of personal lessons in that time, and I find this one, about thinking before you speak, continues to resonate. It was in that job that I realized I didn't always have to contribute my thoughts. Sometimes, I realized later, I looked like a know-it-all, and many times I didn't leave room for others to contribute. It took some difficult circumstances for me to be able to see myself the way I was being perceived by my boss. And eventually, I learned to lean back in our conversations and contribute only when I truly had something of value to add, something that would bring the conversation forward or improve the project somehow. I learned how not to antagonize her, which, at the time, was the best thing I could do as I looked for a more suitable position. When I left that job, I had learned many difficult lessons and continue to practice, because, let's face it, I'm still learning, that particular one. That lesson was likely the most pivotal for me in my 40s in terms of the application in a variety of scenarios. There have been times I've leaned back and allowed space for family, friends, and coaching clients, transforming my relationships with them. Of course, I still fail sometimes in my efforts to listen more than I speak. A lot of times. But overall, I've seen my career and relationships benefit greatly from that practice. It is so important to use your voice and speak your truth. It's also important to know the consequences and be okay with that. When I consider speaking my truth, I think about whether my sharing it will help or change anything for the person in front of me. And then I decide whether I need to share it for my own needs or for theirs. I also consider whether sharing that truth will have negative consequences and if they'll be worth the risk. Sometimes my contribution to a conversation just isn't necessary or helpful. Another big lesson in my 40s has been to stop lying to myself about certain character traits and behaviors. I used to think I was that empathetic friend with a shoulder to cry on. I wanted to be that friend. But after an interaction with a woman who came to me multiple times every week for a couple of months, crying and resharing her story of devastating emotional trauma, I realized I'm not that friend. Susan, you need to stop reliving that experience and choose your next step, your next adventure. I love you and you are always welcome here. I'm just not the friend with an unending shoulder to cry on. I'm the friend you come to for a kick in the ass. I'm the friend who will sit with you and listen and then ask you the hard questions to help you find solutions. And I'll stick by you and encourage you as you move forward. My friend left my house with a puzzled and lost expression on her face, and I returned to the dining room to tell my husband what I had said to our guest. I felt terrible, partly because I thought I'd hurt her feelings, and partly because I was so disappointed that I had to acknowledge that I was not the kind of friend I thought I was. My friend came over a week later, and we invited her in for dinner. She smiled as I welcomed her into the kitchen and put her to work peeling carrots. She had a light about her that I hadn't seen since we met, which was within about 8 weeks of the trauma she had experienced and that she had shared with me. Thank you, Sarah. You were the friend I needed last week. No one else said those words to me in that way. You made me stop to think about what I want next in my life, and for the first time since this happened, I'm feeling a little bit hopeful. It is so important to acknowledge aspects of yourself that you might be uncomfortable with, and either address them or own them. Each person in my life serves a different purpose. I know who to talk to when I need a shoulder to cry on, and I know who will offer the kick in the ass I might need at any given moment. Now I know which role I fill, and I find it far more satisfying. There are a couple of other lies I was telling myself about who I was, and as I became more aware of them, I either embraced them or changed my behavior. I thought I was a kind person until I caught myself talking badly behind someone's back. I could have excused the behavior by blaming her for her unkindness, but it was my behavior that was impacting me. I couldn't call myself kind if I was doing that, and I certainly wasn't going to embrace that behavior. The consequence was that I didn't like myself when I was doing that. So I'll ask you, what are your internal lies? Are you not as kind or considerate as you think you are? Are you a complainer who carries a constant cloud around you? Are you truly a good friend to people? Do you show up? If you aren't consistently just as respectful to the checker at the grocery store or the server at a restaurant as you are to a CEO, if you post online hostile, personally insulting comments, or if you don't clean up after your dog, you might be lying to yourself about being a kind and considerate person. If you find yourself falling down the rabbit hole of complaining without talking also about potential solutions or gratitude for the other things in your life, you might be lying to yourself about being a positive, upbeat person that people want to spend time with. And if you talk behind the backs of people, or you don't show up for friends when you say you will, you might be lying to yourself about what kind of friend you really are. When I was lying to myself about the kind of friend I thought I was, I did damage to myself and to those I was trying to help. It was uncomfortable for me to be something I wasn't, and I'm sure those friends I was trying to serve could see right through my efforts. Where's the trust in that? Where's the value? To continue that disconnect, which I could have, I'd have to be very clear to myself about what I was doing and be okay with those consequences. And they were likely to be more discomfort around friends, maybe loss of friendship, and definitely the loss of my potential to help by being true to myself and being the kind of friend that I know I can be. What are the consequences of the lies you're telling yourself? Do you like yourself? Are you satisfied with who you are, truly? There is so much beauty in growing older if we embrace these opportunities to learn about ourselves, change what isn't working for us, and choose generosity, kindness, and curiosity in every aspect of our lives. 25 years ago, my definition of success would be very different from my definition today, as I near the half-century mark. Wow, that sounds big. But the beauty of aging, for me, has been a distinct shift in how I view, build, and maintain relationships. I've learned to remove toxic people from my life, surround myself with people who truly want the best for me and for our global community, and focus my attention on relationships, not things. I've learned to be more comfortable in my own skin. After all, when this life comes to a grinding halt, whenever that may be, I'll know I was a success based on the quality of the relationships in my life. What will you learn in this decade of your life? What regrets will you avoid by taking steps every day to change your path? Did I mention I love birthdays? Thank you for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will. To learn more about what a communication coach can do to help you and your team nurture relationships and improve outcomes, visit elkinsconsulting.com.
To me, honey, while I say, how could you tell me that you're going